Hey, so once again, I would like to welcome everyone to the Innovation Forum. Today's session will be a continuation of our part one, so we'll focus on the Priority Matrix, the 2026 wireless decisions. And for that, I'm pleased to welcome once again and introduce what we are calling our convergence troublemakers. So we have Dean Bubley from Disruptive Analysis, Peterson from Boingo Wireless and chair of the WBA, Necati Canpolat, also on the board of WBA and the chair of some of our key working groups. We have MacPherson from Cisco, wireless CTO, and also co-chair of the Innovation Forum. And between myself and some of the WBA team members will help moderating the session today. So this seems like a game, but personally I think it's a very important exercise that will help us shape WBA's priorities until the end of the year. And just in about 2 months, we'll start the definition of our 2027 technical roadmap. So everything that is being discussed here is going to be brought into that exercise as we go through, some prioritization and industry auscultation that we do every single year. So what's our agenda? We are just going to continue the matrix exercise. As you might recall, if you attended part one, that is already available. We would like to kind of have a perception on, from the trends and the technologies we are seeing, whether this is kind of something that we should consider as investment now, something that we should, make part of our roadmap and kind of steer, or something that is really important to monitor, influence, and drive the standards. And as we go through this exercise, we'll just try to converge here the audience. We'll have a couple surveys and interaction throughout here the webinar, so your input will also be part of the final report, as then we try to come up with some analysis and prioritization. Having said that, this is our matrix. I will, just ask our, panelists to share their perspectives now, starting on this bottom layer. As you might recall, we went through Wi-Fi 7 massification, neutral host, Wi-Fi 8 next generation, 6G, convergence, and private networks angles. And I think while those are kind of the highways of connectivity, today we focus more on enablement, services, and complementary type technology that can help improving wireless networks as a whole and come up with new frontiers in terms of use cases. So let's jump straight into it. Let's make it interactive. As always, I'll start here with our panelists, but anyone that would like to raise your hand, put a question here on the chat, and I'll get you on the floor and really get your input. But satellite integration and use cases. I imagine this is a big one. For most of the team members here joining, I see a mix of WBA members, partners from different sets of the industry, operators, vendors, also some colleagues working on the device and infrastructure side. So maybe, for this round, I would like to start with Dean. So Dean, you have been very vocal around your perspectives on these emerging satellite first or hybrid connectivity models. I think we all saw your comments around even thinking about a new company that would solve all these problems. So from Earth here, could you share with us where you think this is heading on our matrix perspective now, next, and steer?
Right. I think from satellite integration, there's 3 or 4 separate dimensions here. I think there's a couple that have been around for a while, which is where you've got satellite broadband linked to Wi-Fi locally, most obviously with Starlink, but other satellite access businesses. I think there's also a growing amount of satellite plus aviation and maritime. So increasing numbers of uses of Starlink, but also Amazon Leo in future, on aircraft and ships. And then I think the really interesting one is the satellite direct-to-device market, which is it's like it's a sort of bit of Heisenberg's connectivity. It's both massively overhyped and massively interesting at the same time. The key thing that is missing from all the discussion around the direct-to-device, whether that's for phones especially, but also IoT, is that it's not going to work indoors. And we all know how difficult it is to get cellular signals through the walls to a cell tower, a mile down the road. So getting signal through ceilings, walls, windows to a phone from space, and even more difficult getting it back again, is essentially not going to happen. And so I think that any of the satellite operators that are serious about trying to create satellite primary solutions are going to need to have a solution for indoors. And that is likely to involve Wi-Fi. It might involve some sort of cellular roaming or MVNO deal as well. But Wi-Fi is clearly going to be a central part of that. And I think that the possibility here is for open roaming to essentially get a first mover advantage compared to the cellular integration, which has got all sorts of question marks and is not trivial to do anyway. So I'm a big believer that satellite plus Wi-Fi should be a top priority.
Interesting. So Dean, if we blend, the D2D where we are seeing some announcements, but the need for this, indoor interworking, maybe open roaming, for you is more of a next for the combination of both, or?
I think the D2D one clearly is more sort of next, because at the moment the main emphasis of D2D, certainly in terms of what's happening in the market, is outdoor remote area coverage infill. It's if you're in the mountains or in the desert or during emergency outages using satellite backup for cellular connectivity. And so I think that, but if you look at some of particularly with the SpaceX IPO upcoming, there's a lot of discussion about, can you do everything from space? And the answer is no, but you can do a bit more of it if you partner with Wi-Fi, and integrate it more tightly.
Okay, no, that's very clear. So thanks, Dean. So maybe going here around the table, Derek, you have been helping a lot the operators, right, with this indoor coverage. Have you been seeing some satellites phasing into those discussions and complementarity?
Yeah, definitely. We see a lot of promise. I'm all about the convergence. So where you have hybrid models where satellites are augmenting your fiber and your Wi-Fi connections. I mean, we did it at Guam. It was a really good example. We beat the furniture arriving in Guam when they were setting up Guam for the military. And we ended up using satellite as the backhaul and Wi-Fi there. So I think it has a lot of places. We're using satellite quite a bit. So there's definitely that idea about resilience and backhaul and hard to reach locations that are happening now. And we're piloting and we're doing, but I'd agree with Dean on this future case where we're focused in on direct to device and how it augments the mass market access for everybody. I think that we've got a lot of work to do in the WBA and in the satellite groups to kind of focus on how we're going to build that operational model and operational maturity around the integration between Wi-Fi, cellular, and satellite. And I think the WBA, again, is in a great position. So I'd kind of put it as now next, kind of in the middle, now for those strong resilience cases, and next where it gets mass market adoption across those other solution sets.
Got it. Very interesting. So a phased approach. So we are kind of leaning between both. Thanks, Derek. Matt or Necati, your thoughts here on the satellite angle?
Go ahead, Necati.
Well, we are at the beginning of this exciting journey in terms of the Wi-Fi side. Basically, one interesting point, we also started looking at what does it mean from satellite to Wi-Fi. How we can bring that experience to Wi-Fi, where you can just have the seamless connectivity indoor, outdoor, with the coverage the satellite provides. And it will be really interesting to see there's really amazing technology that we bring to the devices. And it will be a number of years, of course, to be able to reach to that point. But there is really great interest in the industry, how we can enable this seamless connectivity, because one of the issues with the Wi-Fi is that coverage, right? Once you just go outside the building, you no longer have coverage. If you can bring the satellite to the device connectivity, then you will have coverage in wherever you go. So it's a very exciting journey and experience that we are looking into.
Thanks, Necati. And then I really like the point you bring. So some of the steering between even satellite and Wi-Fi is what we have been trying to solve between Wi-Fi and cellular. So I'm glad you brought that angle. So Necati, you are between next and steer, more next, or where would your vote go?
Well, for me, I think it will be next, because we are scratching the face, and there's a lot of things that needs to get in place, and then still later on.
Got it. No, thank you so much. And before I hand over to Matt, so we are already running here our interactive poll. So if you just see on the right-hand side of your screen, you can actually vote on where you would like to land, and that will eventually count as one vote here from the audience as well. So Matt, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Bruno. So I think my take on this is that there's a couple of different dimensions. One is coverage, and I think people have talked about coverage. So clearly, satellite is going to offer more coverage than what even 5G can do. And so to me, you can think about coverage from a, what is the size of that coverage model? So the satellite implementations, I think, will provide better coverage outdoor than what we're doing with cellular. I mean, we like to say that cellular covers everywhere, but what cellular really targets is to cover people and where people are. And so there's always going to be locations where satellite would be very useful. I think satellite also, from a coverage standpoint, is a great backup solution. So what we're doing with a lot of our router implementations is, even if you're cabled or if you're going into a cellular system, for various reasons, catastrophic circumstances and things like that, you'd want to be able to have a backup solution, especially in those areas that require that type of resiliency. So that's coverage, but I think there's also a capacity consideration as well. I don't think that 5G will ever have the capacity of Wi-Fi because Wi-Fi is a low radius technology, and we deploy it very dense. But I don't think that satellite will ever have the capacity of the cellular system either. And so you have to take these into account when you're applying your different use cases. So it's going to be somewhat use case dependent. So if I have to put it on this chart, I think there's different components that fall into different areas here. If you're talking about satellite as a backhaul technology, I'd probably put that closer to now. If you're talking about D2D implementations, talking, straight to the device, which we know that all the devices and all the satellite providers are starting to target these new low Earth orbit satellite systems that have giant, antennas the size of tennis courts, right, or even bigger. Why are they doing that? I mean, that's going to give them the ability to actually communicate straight to the device. Well, that's going to be a little bit further out. That's going to be more in the next category.
Got it. So that's very interesting. I think aligns a bit with what Derek was sharing. For the focus, mission critical backhaul that we see already on phones versus D2D. So that's very interesting. So let me put here focused. I think, Dean, you have
one last point that I didn't mention is, and this is definitely in the steer or long time out, there are now some satellites that are being able to do Bluetooth from space. You're doing one-way like beaconing. It does make me wonder whether there's an equivalent Wi-Fi satellite which I'm not quite sure on the dynamics of the link budget, but it just struck me as an interesting one that if Bluetooth can do it in 2.4 gigahertz from orbit, then why can't Wi-Fi?
No, that's interesting, Dean. I'm already imagining you will soon be proposing one more IMT 2030 candidates with this combo. IEEE will be in trouble with some of that, but yeah, why not, right? It's all about the radio and the modulation that then we get back here on Earth. But yeah, no, thank you so much. I'm looking here to the results. We had a good number of votes, and I think half of the audience is going also with next. So I would propose we kind of make the winner on this one is our first next, in between the other dimensions we discussed before. So let me just capture these thoughts. And again, anyone else, feel free to just voice here on the chat if you would like to add some thoughts here to the discussion. A quick reminder, so WBA approved the project on our roadmap for this year in terms of satellite integration use cases. So I think this will be a good opportunity to build on some of this discussion and involve the industry on this two-phased approach. Okay, so I propose we just move to, I'll close here the poll. We got some more votes.
So Bruno, I would like to bring one point, especially regarding the satellite and cellular integration, especially with respect to indoor Wi-Fi. So a lot of if you look at FWA use case is predominantly basically indoor Wi-Fi and basically first haul is cellular. And the same is the case for a lot of satellite deployment that is happening in residential neighborhood in different parts of the world where you have indoor Wi-Fi and backhauled by satellite. And if you look at a lot of OTT applications that are running on these networks, they try to provide the best QoE experience for the end user as quickly as possible, right? And so they rely on the fact that, hey, what kind of access technology I'm connected to, whether it's Wi-Fi or cellular. Those were the two predominant ones available from the OS vendors. And when you start doing that, especially from OTT app point of view, you essentially land in a very bad situation because you start thinking that you have Wi-Fi connection, you have a lot of bandwidth, and when you have these hybrid access, which is like FWA or satellite, that leads to a very bad experience because you will see a lot of video stalls, and if you're doing a calling, you have pretty bad call quality and things like that. So one of the things last year we proposed in WBA is like a backhaul information where we essentially communicate through the beacon that, hey, what kind of backhaul we are working off. And that provides these OTT apps to essentially right size the calling experience or the video quality they want to deliver for the end users. So that's something what we are continuing to make progress, and hopefully it should improve experience for the end users. So just want to bring this. Yeah.
No, Sundit, thank you so much. And the meta perspective here is really, I would say, outcome driven. So when on our last topic, QoE delivery, I think this can be regarded as a discussion point, but definitely with multi-access type technology becomes ever so important. Yeah, thanks for bringing it. But yeah, so with these inputs, I will move it. I think we close on 56% for next, so definitely a winner. Allow me just to now propose we move into the IoT. So IoT, at least for us, has been, I would say, a long-term relationship where we have several initiatives on our roadmap. I would say we had a positive number of deliverables over time, from multi-wireless IoT access type technology, the Wi-Fi driven, protocol, either, on the 2.4 with baseline Wi-Fi Halo, we just released the paper today, but also we worked with LoRa Alliance, LoRa WAN, Wi-Fi integrated access point type work. But we really believe that for this technology to scale, more needs to be done either from the security, life cycle, ops. So we have a couple projects on our roadmap again approved, but maybe, Matt, starting with you and thinking about the enterprise, probably the largest consumer of IoT in the world. I know that this has been evolving to support more flexible IoT models. For instance, the APs now have these dongles where you can plug in some UWB, some beaconing. We even come up with open roaming for IoT now with some success with Fido. So today, how do you see this evolving from an enterprise context, and what we need to still do to make IoT a success? And if it's about scale, how would you vote here on this exercise, Matt?
Yeah, so IoT is a very broad topic because what happens is that you have a lot of different IoT technologies and they're designed for a very specific propagation and bandwidth characteristic. And so you see all these different technologies that are out there, and it begs the question, especially when you're talking to IT departments, what technology to deploy and which one really meets the use case. And in some cases, these technologies compete. I would say that what's currently going on in enterprise is this convergence. I'll just make a quick point. There's more IoT on Wi-Fi than any other access technology. So definitely Wi-Fi is a dominant technology when it comes to connecting things. And then, of course, you have these implementations where you do something like Matter, and Matter can run on Thread or Matter can run on Wi-Fi. And so you're seeing some of these capabilities being integrated on common distribution at the lower layers. The biggest problem that I think I've seen in IoT, and I think a good example of this is healthcare, is when you go into a hospital and you see all these different wireless solutions that are deployed there, you have these OT implementations, and then it's separate from the IT implementation that provides general access to everything that's on the Wi-Fi network or maybe the private 5G network. And so if we can actually converge the OT and the IT implementations, I think there's a lot to be gained. You mentioned security, and security's always been a problem because a lot of times these IoT things may be a very cheap thing. Maybe something as cheap as a tag, it may be something as cheap as a light bulb. And so they don't tend to have very sophisticated stacks, and they don't take into account some of the authentication mechanisms that you were talking about earlier, like auto onboarding, like with open roaming, because the processing or the memory doesn't necessarily accommodate it because they're trying to manage the cost of that device. And so what we're seeing is that if you can converge OT and IT into a common policy domain, that's extremely powerful and something that a lot of enterprises are asking for. So instead of having all these disparate systems, like I said, when you walk into a hospital, you look up on the ceiling, you see all these different nodes, and they're doing all these different functions where IoT is very siloed. You might have something that's doing Matter. You might have something that's doing Thread, different 15.4 technologies. You might have something that's doing Bluetooth for a very dedicated operational purpose. And so what happens is that you introduce these new attack surfaces that it's hard for IT to deal with. Now, if you look at what's happening in the world of APs are now multi-radio platforms. You have 15.1 in there, you have 15.4 in there, you pointed out ultra-wideband is in there, right? So you have these multiple radio platforms that you can build upon. And if you can open up that platform, which is what we're doing over at Cisco, so that you can define the ability to discover, provision, and exchange telemetry, and the way we're doing this is through JSON, and a URL interface, then what you can do then is you can route these different things through your common network platform. Saves a lot of money, and it gives you a common place to manage what your priorities are. How do you want to prioritize this traffic, whether it's a user connecting, maybe it's a surgeon, maybe it's someone staying at the hospital, maybe it's a guest, with these other OT type implementations where you're connecting maybe a heart rate monitor or a machine that's doing a drip, or these different medical devices. And what you're doing then is you're giving this ability to manage and to apply policy back to the IT department while still serving those OT needs. So that's where we're seeing it go. I think there's been phenomenal progress just over these last couple of years. So expect some convergence, I think, in this domain.
So I know this is probably one of the most difficult ones, Matt, even based on what you shared on these cycles we have been living. But if we think about the IoT convergence, the seamless automated provisioning, the JSON, is it the next that you soon can deliver these large?
Yeah, as far as combining them together, I think it's a next. I mean, clearly IoT is deploying now, but when you talk about from a policy and from a management perspective and converging these technologies, and I do think there's still some consolidation that has to happen in the industry because not all of these IoT technologies will win. There'll be certain winners that bubble up to the top. I would put that in next.
Next, okay, no, sounds good. Yeah, and thanks for shedding a light on how enterprise systems are evolving and all the work we have been doing also with open roaming for IoT. But yeah, let me go here around the table. I mentioned Derek, Necati, and Dean. We all had presentations about IoT. So what's your thoughts here on the scale perspective? Where would you vote?
Yeah, I'll be quick. I'll say now, because we've got to invest and deploy right now. I mean, I agree with a lot of what Matt said. I think the key thing is forever we deployed networks and we were just like focused on the radio and the coverage. And we didn't think about the security, the onboarding, the lifecycle management, and managing those operations at volume. And of all those different devices and what they're doing. And I think that that's been a problem. I think, 20 years ago, I said DPI's got to be a part of everything we do because you got to understand what each device is doing so that you could build a network for each of those devices. And when you go at scale and you're trying to have different security, different lifecycle management, how do they come off? When do they go off? On? All those things are challenging. And we have traditionally just said, okay, connectivity's there, let's be happy. And I think we're realizing, I think everybody's realizing changes. Wi-Fi, as Matt said, there's a lot of different Wi-Fi connections. The cellular has phones. They have other stuff, but primarily most of it's phones. And so they have a little bit more control. We need to build better control. And simplify operations. I mean, I agree with the hospitals and all those locations. They put up a network and they just say, okay, connect all on. Oh, we're going to create a simple segment. Well, a segment's not enough, right? Because all of a sudden, in some of my locations, I have 20 SSIDs I'm managing. And we know that the more SSIDs, more segmentation, it causes more headache. And instead of doing that, we should be managing it at an individual connection level and controlling security and all of those different things associated with that. So I think it's now we need to continue improve the interoperability and simplify operations like what we're seeing with some of these tools. But we've got to be doing it now because they're connected and they're not being connected in the right way in a lot of cases. And so waiting and saying next, I think you're going to get into trouble. So you've got to be planning that now and investing and doing that now and hoping that those improved interoperability and operation tools come so that you're not dealing with segments and you have better ways of doing device identity and strong operational tooling than are available today.
Yep. Interesting, Eric. So definitely you don't want to hear, a CIO, kind of what we call the EPI and the said CIO with some IoT future plans that they want it now and they wanted to manage it. So between what you can deliver today and what Matt is saying will come to the industry is a nice balance. Let's see where we can land here. I'm seeing the vote starting to come in. Dean, Necati, your thoughts?
Well, a couple of things from my side is that the Wi-Fi, especially for the IoT, has improved significantly in terms of the low power and other capabilities that we are putting in place right now. For 802.11bn, Wi-Fi 8 is going to have additional capabilities in support of the IoT, specifically low power and range and etc. And these are really amazing capabilities, beefing up the technology pipeline. And as well as I think the current ongoing work within the WBA, where basically we are trying to be in the open roaming and FIDO alliance, that you can just basically onboard the IoT devices, especially in the industrial setting where you have thousands of devices, how you can really just bring them, connect them to the Wi-Fi network and manage the ownership and the life cycle and all that stuff. So on the one side, there are already great capabilities available. On the other side, we are also improving the additional, technology, pipeline in terms of what is happening. It's going to be ongoing effort and ongoing investment, depending on where you look at and how you look at. But it is really just, again, amazing journey, as Matt indicated, that significant portion of the IoT already is in Wi-Fi, because it is cheap, it is convenient, it is easy to enable to deploy.
Got it. So Necati, for you, definitely on the Wi-Fi angle, Wi-Fi IoT angle, and I see comments on the chat about the multi-access IoT, it's more of a now.
Now.
And Wi-Fi has been evolving, its capabilities. Okay, good.
I'll go for now, but it needs to be realistic. And by that, I mean that the IoT world, yes, some of it is in buildings for specific use cases in a hospital or an office setting. But there's also an awful lot of IoT that's on vehicles or out in the middle of nowhere in a field or along an oil pipeline or something like that. So I think that probably for things which are realistically addressable with Wi-Fi, that's good. And they can integrate things like Bluetooth and probably Zigbee locally, but there will need to be APIs into overall dashboards and control layers. If you've got a logistics company, you'll have some things inside your warehouse. You're going to have a mixture of Wi-Fi, maybe private cellular locally, as well as Bluetooth and other things. But then as soon as a package goes on a truck or in a container, you might end up in the sea. You need to have something else, that goes over the wide area and somehow some way of tying it together in your logistics system. I would also say that there's a substantial amount of IoT which isn't even wireless. I mean, I'm not quite sure on the numbers whether Wi-Fi beats USB, but I suspect it's probably closer than people would like to think. And there's probably quite a bit of like Ethernet and weird control systems for smart building management tools. Often you tend to find that the building management needs to have wired connections because you need power. If you've got a sliding bolt for a lock or something like that, you might do power over Ethernet to do it because you're not going to get that via Wi-Fi. So I think that we need to be realistic and say wireless IoT for in-building use, absolutely, but that's only part of the wider IoT universe. And there's probably a requirement for APIs, or maybe at some point, we'll come to it in a minute, AI and MCP as the sort of layer between the local and the control and distant layer.
Got it. No, thanks, Dean. I think the angle you bring, it's something when we start our projects and the market requirements documents, how we break it down and how we prioritize. So I think you just allude to the fact that in building IoT, Wi-Fi use cases have always been there. Why not leveraging them? So thanks for those inputs. And looking here into our audience, I think more than 70% is also voting on now, invest and deploy. So this is in line with some of the IoT work we have been promoting. But I think now we have also this direction on how to break it down on the roadmap perspective. I also see some comments here from George that leads our MDU work in the WBA, and we did smart home and IoT when you start having, George, Z-Wave, Zigbee, LoRaWAN. So everything we can say is let's try and continue aligning, and some stacks cannot converge. I think, Matt, you were alluding to that. But if everyone agrees, I'll mark it as a now. Any final remarks, comments from anyone? In the Halo, we just launched a report today, so that's another good example. And the stack, the kilometer range, megabit until a kilometer range, I think is quite interesting. Okay,
So I
good.
have a
So,
little bit different perspective on this thing, and the reason is because if you look at basically this, a lot of this IT and IoT world, and I agree with what Matt was mentioning, that having a unified like pane of glass would be the right thing. But unfortunately, when you go and look at a lot of deployments, at least in the mid markets, what you will see is that basically the people who are holding the IT budget are not the same people who are holding the OT budget. And typically, when you go and tell them that, hey, we want to, like, if you tell the IT guys, we want to connect these OT sensors to your, like, let's say, backhaul Ethernet network, they would be very much against it because they are worried about the security of the whole system. And typically these guys will never agree that, okay, these things can blend together. So essentially you will have a lot of projects that go in like a state where you cannot scale it the way you want it. And
yeah.
so I feel that some kind of backhaul technology where you essentially can have these IT and OT system coexist at the same time, while each one of these like IT and OT like budget houses within the organization, they can decide what they want to do with their own thing. That may be easiest to land and expand rather than trying to like combine these things from the get-go. Like in an ideal world, we would want one network, but unfortunately, it's like a lot of IT people, OT people might not even know what a DHCP server IP addressing would look like, right? So it goes to as simple as
Yeah, thanks, Sandeep, for sharing those thoughts. Definitely, again, the backhaul angle and identity management, provisioning, self-discovery of some of these IoT devices for the CIO IT manager will be super useful. But yeah, thanking again everyone here for the inputs on IoT, and we land with around 3/4 voting now. So I think we have some food for thought for our IoT work. Okay, I propose we move on. So we still have two very important topics. The first one is AI/ML in networks with a flavor of automation. What can we really deliver on automation? So for this one, I think I have to start with Necati. WBA recently put out a framework on AI/ML. There is a wide spectrum of opportunity, but we need to focus on the practical outcomes and to prioritize investments. So really from the standpoint of Wi-Fi, wireless technology, Necati, where do you think this framework can help some investment decisions, and where you would position automation on this now, next, and steer?
Well, as you said on the WBA paper we just published, we just discussed these things extensively for those who are curious about what the technology roadmap is, what the state of the industry is, and how really it is going to be in the opportunities and the challenges that we are facing. It will be interesting read for those folks who are interested in the subject further. In short, one sentence is, to me, AI/ML is a strategic imperative for Wi-Fi industry at large, be it over the operators, device vendors, or anybody who is in the ecosystem itself. So it is, just going at the accelerated rate day by day. And the reason for this strategic imperative is three things that I have in mind. One is that when we look at the technology of the Wi-Fi from Wi-Fi 6, where we had the high efficiency, and then we just moved to Wi-Fi 7 with the EHD, extreme high throughput. Now Wi-Fi 8, we have the ultra high reliability UHR, and it just keeps going. With each generation of technology, basically, it is getting more and more complicated because we are bringing additional, the features and capabilities that makes it easy, difficult to basically keep up with the manual management of all the networks and everything else. It is going beyond, humans, static or the manual intervention. Second thing is that the applications are becoming more and more demanding. That we look at over the AR, VR, XR. Even right now, AI itself demanding different type of traffic, and nature of the things are shifting. The third dimension is basically, we just see more and more densification of the networks with the RF environment and everything else in heterogeneous environment. All this is basically just compelling us to look at the, additional tools that we can deal with this, all this, changing environment and changing things. Now, given that, then there is also, fast adoption of the AI itself in the Wi-Fi world. And within this Wi-Fi world, basically, currently we see a lot of appropriate implementation from the vendor side, and those are primarily currently more of a point solution like RRM, radio resource management, or be it over there, diagnostics or something. The AI, also is going to have multi-phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. In the current phase that we have, I see over there AI-assisted networking or AI-assisted Wi-Fi, where basically we currently have the infrastructure with our APs and controllers and cloud. You just put the cloud over there and bring the telemetry and put it together and solve the practical solution. And it actually immediately turns into really OPEX saving and enabling better quality of experience and everything else. It is ongoing, and there's a lot of interest and a lot of things happening over here. And from that point of view, there is no, I think, luxury for us to wait and see what happens in this space so that we can make the investment decision. So that part is now. And then there is the, looking at the investment roadmap over there, or the technology roadmap, the second phase, as we see, is that one from AI-assisted to AI-integrated phase, where basically when we look at what is coming up with the technology with Wi-Fi 8 or 11BN, now things are basically moving in a way that really, even if the network architecture is shifting from what it used to be single AP to now more coordinated effort over there, right? Network-centric approach over there that we need to look at over there. How we really can get all those APs over there, coordinate, communicate, and then deal with the dynamics and everything else. In that sense, basically, now we need to integrate into AI a little bit deeper.
Got it. Yeah, Necati, so
the third phase and final phase, basically, we just keep talking about is the AI ML native Wi-Fi. That is going to be ongoing journey where now we have to move to the Mac M5 level of all that stuff and then modify those parameters dynamically by using the AI ML. So in short, AI ML is a strategic, imperative for us that we need to just act on it now.
No, yes, thanks, Necati. So very, very insightful. And given this is to prioritize 2026 and 2027, I'll keep it here on the now. So let's advance here. Dean, Matt, Derek, your thoughts, please.
I guess I'll jump in because I've been jumping in second every time. Why not? Sorry, Matt. I'm going to agree with a lot of what Necati said. I think it's now, but moving quickly into next. Just to, kind of say, and I'll be quick, now obviously AI is being used for visibility, anomaly detection, root cause analysis, all that kind of stuff. And that's clearly happening now, and it needs to continue, and we need to keep investing in that. Where I think next gets in is where he talked about AI controlled, where AI is actually predicting and making those changes with, of course, appropriate guardrails and human oversight. I think what's keeping us in that next is to be able to fully create autonomous networks, across, again, multi-vendor, multi-access, IoT devices, user controlled devices, and all the different things. I think we're still more in this future leaning approach, because to get there safely, we need consistent telemetry, and we don't have it. So each network, each system, each connected device is giving us inconsistent data. And so it's really hard to create a clear policy unless you have consistent data to be able to do that. And so I think we need to work on developing next this shared industry frameworks about how, these different devices and different networks are feeding us data so that we can have good insight to allow AI to go to that next phase. So I think that there's a lot of governance and trust and model sophistication we need there to be able to get there. And so to me, it's now, yes, on one side, but next on the other side, because we've got a lot of work to do in the WBA and in other organizations to create these multi-access, multi-vendor telemetry policies that allow us to get there.
Yeah, very interesting, Eric. Guardrails for even network management becomes very interesting. Thanks for bringing it. Dean?
I'm going to be brief because I'm running out of time, but I'm going to say steer. And I think there's a bunch of stuff which is happening now, but it tends to be mostly vendor specific, and it's what you could call AI for Wi-Fi, rather than Wi-Fi for AI. And I think that the Wi-Fi industry is not quite as aligned and coherent about this as some parts of, say, the cellular industry are, where you've got AI being baked into the standards for 6G. It's described as being AI native. And a lot of that is around things like consistent model management, data management. It's all the abstraction and all the sort of back office stuff behind AI that allows for interoperability and multi-vendor support. I also don't see the equivalent of the AI RAN impetus in cellular reading across the Wi-Fi. Now, some of that is hype. It's like, it's a vehicle to try and put GPUs everywhere, but there's also some real stuff there that's going on around looking at how certain use cases can leverage AI, so things like sensing in access points. And I think that there's going to be certain AI workloads that can run either on access points or controllers, whether that's in enterprise, but especially actually in the home, where you could imagine things like voice AI capabilities running locally on that or gateway with privacy controls. And I think that we're nowhere near the sort of standardization of any of that, either not necessarily the applications, but the data and the model management aspects. So I think we should be pushing harder.
Yeah, very interesting, Dean. I think you just raised a so relevant point. For instance, with Alpha S, where Wi-Fi 8 now kind of included on the draft 1.0, will have a much more end-to-end perspective. So whereas AI RAN was for cellular end-to-end, Wi-Fi is typically access AP to, controller, maybe a AAA. That's very, very on point with where Wi-Fi is heading. Thanks for sharing it. Matt, this is becoming a very difficult one. I see the audience is also now next.
Yeah, we're seeing it land in different places. So it's hard to say that machine learning and AI isn't happening now as we're deploying solutions now to do it. AI RRM has actually been out for multiple years now. And AI assisting in network management, I think, has gained an incredible amount of traction. On the other hand, I'll just back up for a second. From a machine learning standpoint, I think we're doing a ton of work, and there's a lot of knowledge that we're pulling in through the analytics at all parts of the network. So the question becomes, how do you use that data? And when you use it operationally, is it something that notifies you, it enhances you, it makes the IT manager or the network engineer more effective and more efficient? I think that's all true. There's still this trust hill to get over. We've all seen AI hallucinate. And so when it comes to manipulating things on the network in real time or a self-managed network, sometimes people use the example of a self-driven vehicle I think it's different here in the network context because again, if AI just starts changing things, you lose track of what's been changed, and then you even start running into some troubleshooting issues. So we're seeing a lot of machine learning, a lot of AI applied to troubleshooting. The ability to, for example, do a capture of packets, see exactly what's going on. The AI can interpret thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of packets and tell you where the issue is. That stuff is definitely happening. Now, there's another part of AI that I think is still just starting to form, and that's AI talking to AI. So I've been asked before, will AI go in the AP? And the answer is yes, it will. And in fact, the chipset providers are starting to do that, and we're seeing these inference engines. So then the question becomes, well, what runs in the AP versus what runs on campus, maybe in the data center, versus what runs in the cloud? And if you go the other way, well, what's running in the device itself? And will these AIs actually communicate to get to a better result? I think that's more vision and more steering at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So are we doing AI today? Yes. Is there a long ways to go with AI? And do we need to steer that? I would say yes as well. So again, I hate to give you sort of a full spectrum answer, but AI is not going away. I mean, I almost look at it like a programming language. It's like saying, well, what kinds of programs can you do if you know C++ or object-oriented programming or something like that? Well, you can do almost anything. And with AI, the horizon and what can be done with it is huge. It's bright. We're going to get better at it. And there's a lot that we still need to learn. And so there's a lot of steering that's going to have to happen. Especially as these AI start to interact.
Yeah. Matt, no, thanks for that. So I think in light of our 2026 prioritization, we'll have to come up with a roadmap. So you are leaning between what can we do now and what can we steer. So that's very interesting, AI to AI concept. So I'll leave your vote here in the middle. I see the audience is leading also between now and next. So if I balance everything here, I'll give you 1 minute to Loay as you raise your hand, if you could provide your quick perspective as well before we move on.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruno. Thanks very much. I totally it's a perspective of which Wi-Fi for AI. So in today's circumstances, we see that over 85% of AI applications are using Wi-Fi to communicate. And talking about Wi-Fi for AI, is it to steer or next or now? I think it's needed now. It's very much needed now. Is Wi-Fi ready to carry any service like AI, edge computing, voice calls, VR, XR? No, it's not. And this is what we're working right now in WBA, in prioritized Wi-Fi calling, is that to get Wi-Fi ready to handle all those services and applications in the near future. And this is what brings Wi-Fi for AI into the now criteria. And we need to work on this all together. And I thank all the operators that joined this group yesterday and working on identifying the KPIs for the voice call. Yes, it's going to be voice call for now, but in the future, we're going to add to it all the services, including AI, XR, and all the other services. We're going to be working on that. The same thing going on other alliances, which makes it really important right now to get Wi-Fi ready to handle those high requirement and intense requirement for bandwidth and latency applications. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Loay. I think you helped here refocusing WBA work in terms of what we can do now. I see the audience, 50% of the audience is also leaning towards now. So once we provide the context, definitely we'll sustain this. But very interesting thoughts, and thanks everyone for that. I propose we move on to one of the topics that we envision that could summarize some of these exercise, independently of everything we do, everything we prioritize, QE delivery as a business KPI. It's kind of the baseline for most of these. I know, Derek, you are a big proponent of us delivering QE. And I'll just ask you, will be second this time once again, because I know, Dean, you have a time constraint. So, Dean, if you were to summarize, some of the discussion, how do you see QE delivery and then its importance within this framework?
I think QoE delivery is hugely important, especially for consumers and residential. And I think that there's a lot of dependency on end devices. I think it becomes more possible to have agents running on home gateways and Wi-Fi routers in the home that are more device aware and that can deduce from a variety of indicators what quality of experience is. But on the other hand, QoE is a hugely complex landscape, and you've got lots of different parts of the chain. So I think that we're only going to be able to touch some of that, and that the whole end-to-end thing has to be rooted in the application layer as well as infrastructure. And I know there's a bunch of organizations that are doing good stuff here, but it's one of those things where you have to instrument lots of different points, and it's not obvious if you like who owns the umbrella.
Very interesting.
So I would say next. I would say next, but it's a complex and multi-party thing. And I apologies that I'm going to have to drop in a couple of minutes.
For the end-to-end perspective. No, Dean, very, very clear. So, Derek, I know you have been challenging us more often just to go business, perspective end-to-end and move from a pure technical view. Sometimes in our project that I believe is also relevant. But how do you see, these QE-based KPIs, driving real outcomes, and where you would position them on this maturity scale?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll go now. I think, it's not a nice to have metric to be able to drive a business outcome when you're spending a bunch of money on connectivity inside of a location, whether it's your home or your farm or your stadium. You want to drive an outcome, and that means adoption, satisfaction, confidence in that infrastructure that you put in, that it's going to deliver that outcome that you want. And so it has to be now. I think we've focused so much of our KPIs in the past on, signal strength, RSSI, throughput, megabits downloaded, but who cares? I mean, that's not what people care about. What they want is, hey, is the application I'm trying to run running the way it should be running? If I'm sitting in the stadium and I've got a button on the seat, can I click that button and make a bet? And that bet's going to be realistic, and I'm going to actually be able to manage it. And that is what KPIs we need to be looking at. All the other KPIs, the network KPIs, we spend a lot of time on that. There are business KPIs we need to be thinking about. How many people are connecting to Wi-Fi? One of the cool ones when we first started PassPoint is that people go, oh, if we do PassPoint and the carriers automatically connect to Wi-Fi at an airport, and we saw 9% of the people at peaks back then connecting to the Wi-Fi at the airport. Now we're in the 80s and 90% of the people connecting. Why? Because we said we need to drive connectivity, and we need to drive that KPI and get people connected. Not I want faster speeds and RSSI and all that. So I think QoE is here. It's now. It's what should guide our investment. It should guide our operations. It what gives you differentiation. And so you should have those conversations now and go, what are the business KPIs around this deployment that I'm doing? What do you want? And every venue, if they don't know what they want, you need to help them understand, because some of them, they're not thinking in that way of what they want. I want people to get through TSA faster, or whatever it is, at an airport. Whatever it is, you need to figure out what those are, blend them in, and you need to measure them, because if you don't measure them, they don't exist. And so to me, delivery of QoE is key. I've been saying this for a long time, and I think that there's a lot of stuff we can do to improve it by align your technical teams and your business stakeholders closer together so that you can drive those business outcomes.
Yep. No, thanks, Derek. And I think there's a transformation ongoing also in our programs where we have things like real-time QoS and even Wi-Fi DAS and thinking about CapEx, OpEx models. So yeah, thanks for keep pushing the teams on doing this. Necati, QE, you mentioned Wi-Fi evolution, so for you it's now?
Yeah, it is now. And I think the data in this QE has very tight connection to AI. How you can do it over there with the complexity and everything else without AI is going to be interesting. When you bring the AI, we are pretty much there, and it is now.
No, perfect. Thank you for that. And Matt, many of the things we do, it's really to improve user experience and QoE.
Yeah, I think quality of experience, you have to be a little bit careful because it's not quite the same as QoS. I think when we talk about quality of experience, you want to make the network transparent. So what's the experience when you're connecting to the network? What's the experience once you get on the network? What's the experience when you move between networks, when you go indoors to outdoors, things like that. So there's a lot of work, and there's things that we're obviously doing once you're connected to the network to prioritize and to give the appropriate queuing characteristics, marking characteristics, or what we call in determinism a bounded latency type capability. But I think that this will continue to grow. The better we are at absorbing high density a high number of devices into the network, and to do that in a predictable way, the more we can apply that particular access technology to a broader set of use cases, and so that will produce growth. So I would say it's now, but look, there's going to be ongoing development here.
Very interesting. So thanks, Matt. And looking into the votes, I think we have more than 80% also going into now. So very interesting exercise on this part too. So if we just do a quick sum up of the results, it seems that Wi-Fi 7 connectivity highway is pretty much enabling most of the things we already want to steer, but more, conclusions to come out of the exercise here. At this stage, I think we are on the top of the hour. I think this was a very useful exercise. I would like to invite the audience to continuing joining us and following the work. So we'll be in Dallas in roughly 3 weeks, where the CTO Innovation Forum will get together on a face-to-face event. So if you have the opportunity to join, please do so. We'll also carry on working on our roadmap, cross-industry forums, workshop and alignment, and hopefully launch our new roadmap towards the end of the year. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, feel free to drop us a line here on this email. And once again, I'm really grateful for the time that our panelists have invested in helping us to shape this wireless priorities matrix. I hope it was useful, and we'll get back to you with the next steps and the reports out of this exercise. I also see some movement here on the chat, I think quite useful, but everyone provided here to the audience. So once again, thank you so much to everyone, and see you hopefully in Dallas. Have a good day.